The Gulls and Slips Crochet Cowl is an intermediate crochet pattern designed to imitate the look of the Gulls and Garter knit stitch. You can crochet this stunning textured cowl by weaving a floater strand of yarn through your stitches as you crochet to leave behind floats. Later, you'll come back and crochet those strands into place, creating the beautifully textured arrows of the design. This crochet cowl is worked in the round from the bottom up and is easy to customize in size. I'll be sharing the multiples you need to repeat the stitch pattern so you can customize the circumference of the cowl, as well as the multiple for the row repeats so you can easily customize the length of your cowl. Without further ado, let's crochet the Gulls and Slips Crochet Cowl.
For this pattern, you're going to need 100 grams of worsted weight number 4 yarn. I'm using Lion Brand Basic Stitch Premium, and you can see that I've got it wound into a cake here. That's because for this pattern, you need to be able to work from the inside as well as the outside of your yarn. So if your yarn isn't one where you can pull from both, you'll need to cake it up like this, or you can also wind it, hand wind it into 2 separate balls. You're also going to need a US K 10.5 6.5 millimeter crochet hook, or a hook that's about 1 to 1.5 millimeters larger than your suggested ball band here. This pattern needs to be worked loosely with a large hook in order to make it, and you'll see in the demonstration why. You're also going to need a tapestry needle for weaving in your ends, scissors to cut those tails, and then if you would like, you can use a removable stitch marker to mark the beginning of your round. There will be a link in the description box below to the free written version of this pattern on my website if you want to follow along with the video instructions. Let's get started. So to start this cowl, you're going to chain 80. I always start my stitches like this, but you can start with a slip knot instead. So chain 1, and you're going to want to chain these loosely, and how you do that is you kind of just pull up on each chain as you make it. So that's 2, 3, 4. So I'm just kind of pulling up, and it is just slightly larger than the millimeter of my hook when I do that. This is going to make it easier to get back into those chains later. If you death hook the yarn and make very tight chains, look at that. We're not going to be able to work into those back bumps. See the difference? And we want to do that on the next row. So be careful to chain loosely. Once you've chained 80, it's time to join in the round and start round 1. It's very important that you don't get this beginning chain twisted, which can be difficult. So I'm going to smooth out my chain here and make sure it's not twisted before I start working in the round. All right, so I'm going to flip my chain upside down to get to the back bumps. And the first round is to slip stitch in the back bump of each beginning chain around. And again, you're going to want to keep working loosely. All of the stitches in this pattern are worked loosely due to the nature of these stitches. They tend to be tight. So my first back bump is kind of hard to see because of the way I start my stitches, but it's right here. And you can place a stitch marker here to keep track of the beginning of the round, or I just keep an eye on the tail. That will do the same thing. So just continue slip stitching in the back bump around, and if you made your slip stitches loosely, it should not be a problem to get into them. And continue to make the slip stitches loosely on this round by just lifting a little bit before pulling through that second loop. Oops. Just want the back bump. Oh my goodness. So go ahead and continue slip stitching in the back bump all the way around, and I'll meet you at the beginning of the next round. Once you get back to the beginning of the round, I wanted to mention that this is a good point to stop and check your gauge, see if you're close to the pattern, and if you're happy with the circumference of your cowl at this point. it's not too far along that if you're not happy with your circumference, you can go ahead and start over with a different chain multiple of 8. But if you are happy and you're ready to move on to round 2, we're going to slip stitch in the back loop of each slip stitch around. So we just finished working into the back bump here, so you will need to turn your work up top a little bit to see where you're working next. So my tail's here, that's my first stitch of the round. So you're going to slip stitch into the back loop loosely and do that all the way around. And you're sorry if you can hear my daughter in the background, she's playing next to me. And she apparently is not happy with the sock that she has in her hand. So you're going to slip stitch in the back loop only around for this round and the next 2 rounds after this. So that will be 3 rounds of slip stitch to the back loop only. I'm going to go ahead and do that, get the sock from Annie, and I'll meet you back. Once you've completed those rounds, it's time to work the first round of the body. So we just completed the first 4 rounds of the border, bottom border, and we're starting the body. So for the first round of the body, we're going to slip stitch 3 in the back loop only. So just like we've been doing. And then we're going to single crochet 5 in the back loop only. Remembering to keep all of our stitches nice and loose. Every stitch in this pattern requires that it be worked loosely so that you do not struggle to insert your hook into the correct spaces. So we've got slip stitch 3, single crochet 5. Now you will notice that the pattern is going to pull down and rise up like this. The slip stitch in the back loop only is stretchy, so as we continue to work, the height of the single crochets will start to stretch them out, so don't worry about that. And that is a repeat around, so slip stitch 3, in the back loop only, and single crochet 5 in the back loop only. So I'm going to work that around and I will meet you for the next round. Once you get to the beginning of the round, you're ready to start round 2 of the body, and this is where things get interesting. So you need to join a second strand of yarn that is going to be our floater yarn, and you want to place it underneath your working yarn with the tail in the front. So we've got our tail in the front, we'll weave that in later, and we've placed it under our working yarn. So it is in the back for us to grab later. But for now, we're going to slip stitch 3 in the back loop only. And then we're going to move that float yarn forward. So we're going to pull it to the front of our work, from the back to the front, keeping it under our working yarn. And then we're going to do waistcoat in the next 5 stitches. So the very first time you work it, it is a little difficult. So to work a waistcoat stitch, this is our next single crochet. And instead of working into the top 2 loops, we're going to split the 2 vertical legs of the single crochet. So your hook goes right between them, through to the back, and do you see that strand there? We want to go to the left of it. We do not want to go to the right, because that slips us up into those 2 top loops that we don't want to go into. We want to go through the front 2 legs and to the left of that strand. And you'll know if you're in the right spot because it will be kind of tight. And when you yarn over and pull up a loop, you'll see it come up in between those 2 vertical legs. Now we want to work this loosely by pulling it up a little bit so that we can get into the center of that stitch the next time around. So that's how we do a waistcoat. We're going to do it in 5 stitches. We already did 1. the left of that loop in the back. And this is why it's so important to work these stitches loosely so that you can actually work this stitch. This one seems to be tight for me. There we go. Once you've completed your waistcoat in the 5 stitches, you're going to use that floater yarn and move it to the back. And you want to make sure you don't pull that yarn too tightly. We want it to be nice and snug, not too loose, but not too tight. We want it snug though. So with the floater yarn in the back, under our working yarn, we're going to repeat that around. Slip stitch 3 in the back loop only, floater yarn front, waistcoat 5, floater yarn back. After you've worked a couple repeats, this is what your piece should look like with the floater yarn in the front of the 5 waistcoat stitches and behind the 3 slip stitch in the back loop onlys. So continue working this repeat around and I'll show you what to do in the next round. Once you make it back to the beginning of the round, you should have your floater yarn in the back here. Just go ahead and leave it. We won't need it again for a couple more rounds. So to start round 3, we're going to do exactly what we just did, but without the floater yarn. So you're going to slip stitch in the back loop only for the next 3 stitches. And then you're going to waistcoat in the next 5 stitches, and you may need to kind of push that floater yarn out of the way so you can see where you're supposed to be going into. And that is what it should look like. So go ahead and continue that repeat around, slip stitch 3 in the back loop only, waistcoat 5, and I will meet you at the beginning of the next round. Once you've made it back to the beginning of the round, it's time to start round 4. So you're going to slip stitch 3 in the back loop only, you're going to waistcoat 2, and then you're going to work a waistcoat 1 under loose strand. So what that means is you're going to put your hook under the loose strand and then work a waistcoat stitch in the next stitch. And what this does is it pulls that loose strand up to create those arrows in the pattern. You're going to waistcoat 2. Oops. And that is what it should look like, and that is our repeat around. So slip stitch 3 in the back loop only, waistcoat 2, waistcoat 1 under loose strand, waistcoat 2. Once you get to the end of the, or continue that all the way around, and I will meet you at the beginning to talk about what we do from here. Once you get back to the beginning of the round, it's time to start repeating rounds 2 through 4. So you're going to repeat rounds 2 through 4 9 times, giving you a total of 10 of these arrows that have been picked up. And the only change you're going to make is when you repeat round 2, instead of joining a new floater thread, you're going to be using the one that's already attached. So that looks like this. We're going to slip stitch 3 in the back loop only. And then we're going to move that floater thread to the front, and then we're going to waistcoat 5 and continue the rest of round 2, and then 3 and 4, and so on. So once you've finished your 9 repeats for a total of 10 arrows, I will meet you at the beginning of the round for the border. Once you've completed your repeats and you've got your 10 arrows, you can go ahead and cut that floater yarn. I already cut mine. And we've got to do one more row before working the border. So we're going to repeat round 3, which is slip stitch 3 in the back loop only, waistcoat 5. So slip stitch 3. Waistcoat 5. So go ahead and complete that around, and I will meet you back at the beginning for the border. Once you've completed that round, it's time for the border, which is just slip stitching in the back loop only of each stitch around for 4 rounds. So you may want to keep a stitch marker in your first stitch to help keep track of the beginning of your row, because these back loop only slip stitch rows tend to kind of disguise the beginning of your round. So yeah, once you've completed 4 rounds of slip stitch in the back loop only, then it'll be time to weave in ends and block your finished piece. Once you get back to the end of the round, this is what your cowl should look like, and you're ready to fasten off, weave in ends, and enjoy your new cowl. So to fasten off here, what I like to do is I cut my yarn, pull the tail all the way through, thread up my tapestry needle, and you can do kind of an invisible join with your tail here. So we've been slip stitching. I finished here. I'm going to go into, do you see that V to the right of my thumb there? I'm going to go into that V from the front to the back under both loops. And then I'm going to go back to where that yarn came from the front. So back to that area where my tail was coming from front to back. I'm going to pull that together. It should create what looks like a slip stitch right next to the other slip stitches. And then I'm going to weave in my tail on the inside. I'm going to weave in my ends. I just kind of go back and forth through the stitches that I've already created, weaving up and down through them. I like to go up and down, back and forth, to really secure that tail in place so it doesn't work out over time, especially if you're working with a yarn that is slippery, like a rayon, cellulose, silk, artificial silk fiber. Once you've worked it in far enough, you can snip it, tug it. That will kind of hide it away. Maybe I needed to snip that a little bit closer. Here we go. Now it's gone. And then repeat that process for the rest of the ends, and then you can go ahead and block this cowl if you want to. you know, if it block using your preferred method if desired is what I've been going with. I prefer to wet block basically everything that I make, even though this is Lion Brand Basic Stitch Premium acrylic yarn. It does react to blocking. It adds a little bit of drape and relaxes the fabric. So that's what I'm going to be doing with this piece, and what I recommend that you do with your pieces, as long as the yarn you're using says it's okay to wet block. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this cowl. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you make this cowl, tag me on social media using @Mandobug, #Gulls and Slips Cowl. If you liked this tutorial, please leave a thumbs up and a comment down below. It helps other people know that this is a good tutorial they might enjoy. And until next time, guys, happy crafting. Bye.